Good evening, my local drones. This is Bio Gundam, and I am back again for another review. Today's review will be about the anime series Guilty Crown. First impressions. When I first got into the show, I went to it with low hopes of this being good, and oh boy, was I right to do so, because no one could prepare me for the train wreck that is Guilty Crown. But I will honestly admit, it's a fun train wreck, and I definitely enjoyed the ride. Now, let's move on to story. It has been 10 years since the apocalypse virus first made contact with people of Japan, and during the chaos first outbreak, the UN has sent an elite task force known as the GHQ to help people of Japan in their hour of need and help contain the outbreak, but at a great. But sadly, during their 10 years of service, the GHQ have become tyrannical and are even oppressing the very people they were supposed to. But not all is lost, dear viewers, because a king will arise and free the people of Japan and restore peace and freedom to the land. Our story begins with main character Shu Oma, a bland school student who is bored and wants something exciting to happen. Well, be careful what you wish for, Shu, because you just might get it. So one day, while he is chilling in his favorite spot to eat lunch, he comes across an injured girl named Inori. And while talking to her, she gives Shu this vial and requests him to deliver it to some guy named Guy. After their little chat, she is violently taken away by the GHQ, and Shu eventually goes to deliver this vial. He finds out that this guy, named Guy, is the leader of a rebel group named Funeral Parlor, whose main mission is to kick the GHQ out of the country and return Japan's independence. So during their little chat, Funeral Parlor's main base becomes under attack, and Guy tells Shu to get the vial out of here, because Shu doesn't really have much choice in the matter to say no at this point, whether he wants to or not, because he is at a terrorist camp. There are giant robots and they're here to kill people. So Shu has to get out here lickety-split. During the battle, Shu manages to save Inori, and while they're getting chased, the vial shot and shatters. And during the incoming explosion, Shu gets a superpower called the Power of Kings, which gives him the ability to pull weapons and cord voids out of people. Or in the context how he first used it, pretty much gets his hand between someone's tits and grabs and then pulls a weapon out. Using this ability, he manages to keep the GHQ at bay during the attack, and now, whether he wants to or not, he has become the secret weapon of Funeral Parlor in their fight against the GHQ. So the story for Guilty Crown is pretty much a textbook example of a cookie-cutter jack-of-all-trades plot, because it takes a lot of elements from a whole bunch of different shows, like for a few examples of Code Geass, Blue Gender, Soul Taker, and Evangelion are the main ones I can see here. Because Japan has been invaded by some evil organization. There is some sort of virus going around that's killing people. There's a slut going around giving people superpowers. There's a power out there that people call the power of kings, or the power of some sort of royalty or warrior or some shit like that. And last but not least, there's some Adam and Eve social Darwinism subplot about human evolution or something like that, which I will talk about later. Now, you are probably thinking that I have a problem with this kind of cookie cutter jack of all trades storyline, and I do have a kind of problem with it, but for now I just want to talk about how the story plays out, because just word to the wise, I am pretty much going to spoil most of the major plot points, because if I don't, you're not going to understand the mindset I have while going into this review. So the first half of the story can be summed up as training, terrorist missions, and school life bullshit. And to be perfectly honest, these were the most boring episodes I've ever had to sit through in my life. I don't have a problem with the training and the missions because they were engaging, and I will admit that some of the battles were slightly interesting, and they got the point across of why, why Funeral Parlor is fighting against the GHQ. But the school life shit is really boring, really predictable, to say the least. And pretty much after a series of episodic missions and school life bullshit, we find out that Inori is a clone of the main character's older sister, Mana, who was pretty much patient zero of this virus, and apparently plans to marry Shu to kill all of humanity and give birth to a new race, or something like that. And there are a few people in this other group that are trying to achieve this. So apparently a few members of the GHQ are part of this other organization, and this other organization's goal is pretty much to create incest between Mana and Shu to kill off humanity. Well, that just sounds fucking retarded, but you know what? Fuck it. We'll go with it. I'll go with it. Fuck it. And the second half takes place is after this huge explosion takes place in the entire city. And the city is pretty much fucked up and cut off from the rest of the world. Except for some reason they still have internet and phone access. But just another plot hole. During this part, the main character becomes the leader of this pseudo-society that has been formed by high school students and members of funeral parlor, which for the most is running okay under the leadership of the main character and the people who give him advice. This is probably the better part of the story, because main character isn't being as passive as he used to be, and he is now put in the leader role instead of being a passive follower that takes orders. But after a few certain events, he basically becomes a tyrannical king of a dictatorship, and I'm like, holy shit, this is cool. And this is a lot more interesting than the school missions. I mean, this is a lot more interesting than the missions and the school life bullshit. But like most dictatorships, in the end, it ends with him in a very bad way, with basically Shu being overthrown, and just before they kill him, Guy, who should be dead at this point in the story, comes out of nowhere, takes his powers, and is now working for the very people he was originally trying to fight against. Okay, makes sense, we'll go with it again. Shu ends up escaping and becomes a depressed emo, while Guy is continuing his evil plan, which doesn't seem very evil, but you know, he's standing in the way of the main protagonist, so of course it's now evil. So during a few episodes of build-up, you know, Shu's stepmom steals the last magic vial with superpowers to give it to someone that can defeat Guy and the evil organization. To make a long story short, Shu pretty much gets his powers back. He becomes Jesus-kun. Apparently, getting his powers back will slowly kill him. Eventually, he confronts Guy. They end up with a fucking huge boss fight. Mana is dead. Guy dies. The virus is destroyed. Everything goes back to fucking normal. We time skip, and now the main character is still alive, except he is now blind and has a robot arm. Even though it was just established that, you know, getting his powers back would kill him. But you know what? Fuck it. Fuck it. We'll go with it. The one and only positive I'm going to say is the fact that this show had quite a lot of promise to it, despite its cookie-cutter, jack-of-all-trades storyline. And at face value, it's written alright, but that's where my positives end, because I have quite a few things to say about the show in a negative context. But before I continue, a little side note. What I think about Guilty Crown's storyline as a whole, it's almost like a role reversal of Code Geass. It's almost like a what-if situation if Suzaku was the main character instead of Lelouch, because Shu reminds me a lot of Suzaku from Code Geass, and Guy is like Lelouch, except they're more watered-down version of them and they have slightly different personalities, but they still have a similar role. But back to my negative. I think my main problem is shows like this can't seem to keep a consistent tone going, and Guilty Crown is especially guilty of this, no pun intended, because the tone of the show pretty much changes every episode, from war drama to rom-com to ecchi to slice of life, and then to shock factor at the drop of a hat. It comes off very disjointed and almost very silly at times. One example is there's an episode where they're at the beach, they're doing slice of life stuff, there's some fan service going down, and then halfway through the episode, it becomes an espionage mission with them trying to sneak into one of the bad guys' bases of operations, I think, and at the same time. So while this happy-go-lucky shit is going down, there are explosions, there are people dying left and right, blood and body parts flying everywhere, and then in a split second we're back to swimsuit and school bullshit. Another major thing that really bothered me with Guilty Crown is the fact that for the most part the storyline is very forced. And for you people that are listening to this review and saying, well, what kind of story is not forced? It's somewhere by Gundam, are you a fucking idiot? And for the most part you would be right about storylines being somewhat forced. But the main problem is the fact that the main character was pretty much forced against his will to join this rebellion that he originally didn't want to join or have any involvement with in the first place. He just wanted something exciting to happen. Well, I guess he got his wish, didn't he? You know what? Fuck it. Like, throughout the entire series, throughout the first half, he was passive, doing whatever this rebel group was telling him to do, and pretty much going with the flow of things, which isn't really a good thing when your main character, who I might add is going to be one of the major driving forces of your story, is this passive, especially in this type of setting and story, where it's super serious, the stakes are very high, people are dying left and right, there's a virus, you know, and all that kind of shit. Unlike, for example, Code Geass, where the main character had a goal in mind, and he was always a proactive force in the story, and it was always the world reacting to him as a character. When it comes to Shu, it's him reacting to the world, it's not the world reacting to him. And despite the fact that Shu supposedly has the power of kings, I mean, isn't a king supposed to move the world, not the world move him? Another problem I had with Guilty Crown is the fact that it's very random at times with its plot twists and plot inconvenience. The plot twist seems to pretty much come out of nowhere with no foreshadowing and no explanation for why these things are happening. Like, for example, Guy being alive and becoming the quote-unquote bad guy. Like, I understand he explained his reasons for why he did it, but he could have just done all that shit all by himself without getting the main character involved, because if his goal was to free Mana and end the virus, he could have just done that by himself, because he had the same powers as the main protagonist at that point. Why did he join the GHQ and this other fucking faction, when he could have just barged down there, killed everyone, kill her, kill himself, and Shu would be fine, he would still have his powers, and everything would be okie dokie. We can go home and eat skills. The only thing they actually ever foreshadowed in this entire anime is the fact that the main character's sister and Inori are related in some way. That's literally it. That's the only thing they actually ever foreshadowed. And that's probably one of the most stupidest plot twists. No, it's not. No, it's not the most stupidest plot twist. I retract my statement. It's the most predictable plot twist I've ever seen. And that's the only foreshadowed. So I'll give them props for that. You foreshadowed something. Good work, show. You foreshadowed, but foreshadow everything else. God damn it, or at least give some more hints. Fucking hell. And I think the last nail in the coffin is the amount of logic this series breaks. Like, one big example is that Inori is a famous pop idol, and the GHQ knows that she has connections to funeral parlor, but yet when she transfers into Shu school and starts hanging around there are no police that comes to arrest her, or no one really batting an eye why a fucking famous net idol is hanging around their school. This breaks logic, especially because Inori is actually needed for the evil organization's plan, yet they don't capture her when they could have done so easily. I mean, in other missions and examples, when guards or shit see Inori, they try and capture her, or yet reason when they try and capture her, they're running in the corridor with, machine guns, yet they don't shoot her to incapacitate her. And also, just another thing, if Inori is a famous fucking pop idol and the authorities know that she is connected to the terrorist group, why the hell do they let her to use her songs? I mean, if you're a fucking terrorist, I don't think they're gonna let you be a fucking internet celebrity. And those are just one example I can list, and probably 10 to 20 more, that this show breaks logic and makes no sense. And it's not just the main plot details or situation, because that in itself is a completely different ballgame. And if I went through to explain it all, this video would be much longer than it has to be. It's also the little things as well that don't make sense. Like, for example, when they have that pseudo-society in, the second half, they still had internet and phones working, yet. So why couldn't they use those to try and contact people from the outside world while they were trapped? Because the reason why they were walled off and cut off from the world in the first place is because the local government at large, not the evil organization, thinks that everyone that lived there is dead, and what's left in that area is pretty much ground zero for another outbreak of the virus. Oh my god, so much fucking logic. God damn it. What the fuck were these people smoking, man? I mean, don't these fucking people have Facebook or some shit? I mean, they have internet, they have phones. Can't they call their parents, use Facebook, Twitter? Like, say, help us, local government. We are trapped in the city. Please send refuge or aid, please. Like, Jesus Christ. I mean, they have Twitter. I mean, this is the future, right? So, do they have Twitter? They have Facebook? They have GarageBand? They have iTunes? I mean, they have power and shit. The only thing they needed in that sort of a society was basically get out and food and water. So basically, story-wise with Guilty Crown, don't use your brain, and the story will be A-okay. Now, since I've finished ranting and bitching about the story, it's time to move on to the characters. The main character is pretty much a bland, passive introvert who doesn't really do much, and he stays that way until the series reaches its second half. But up to that point, he was very bland as a character, and in all honesty, bored me to tears while he was on screen. But then, through certain events of the show, at the halfway point, he basically becomes a dictator and starts his own kingdom, which wasn't exactly the best thing for his character in my opinion, because he's way more edgier than I thought he would be. But it's better and more interesting to watch than the person he was from episode 1, because honestly, that fucking I don't want to do it attitude gets boring really fast. So after his dictatorship ends, like most dictatorships do, he goes through a stage of depression and realizes it's time for him to man up and fix the problems that he has caused. And this is where he becomes basically Jesus-kun, and he is fun to watch at this point. But it's already too late for me to care about him as a character, because they wasted so much fucking time of him being generic as fuck. And he only gets good when we get to the second halfway point. But even his development comes off as a little rushed and unnatural, because basically a friend of his dies, and now he's suddenly Hitler. Yet before that point, he has seen plenty of people die, including people that he actually got along with, and that didn't change him then. Just like that one death turns him into... I mean, that fucking makes sense. I mean, god fucking damn it. Okay, so let's move on to the side characters. The side characters are pretty much very one note with nothing much really to remember them by. They feel like hollow shells as characters, and even some characters will get rewritten on the fly, just because. Like Inori, for example, she kills people with no hesitation, and then during some episodes she says she doesn't want to kill people, yet in those same episodes she kills them anyway, even when killing them isn't exactly the only option at hand. Especially when you have people chasing you with machine guns, and they're holding them, and they're still chasing you without shooting at you, even though if they want to capture you, shooting at you would be a better option. And goddamn it, I'm raving again, fuck. Now, I will say that there is some character development. Good job, but it is very poorly done, with the show pretty much time skipping whenever a character goes through some development. Like, for example, main character. Basically, a friend of him dies, and then the series skips to 6 months, and he is now Hitler. I mean, we never saw that fucking change, like, fucking goddamn it. And we see some characters, and speaking about side characters, we see some side characters change to completely different people as they pretty much went through the development off-screen. Off-screen development, very, very bad. Now, I do not hate the fact that there was character development, but problem is that it pretty much is we never got to see their inner monologue or the transition of them slowly changing into a different person, which in turn made the character null and void for me, because proper character development takes time and is a slow process from A to B. You know, for example, character A is an idealist, and eventually getting exposed to all this violence and all this crap and all this depression and misery, character A eventually becomes more cynical, and he becomes a cynical asshole. I mean, that's how character development works. I mean, the bare simple of... Another thing I want to address is that the character interactions feel very bland and almost random at times. Like most of the show, they feel very very bland and copy-paste. It's like, oh, how's your day? Oh, you want to have sex with me? Blah, 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 blah. But after the dictatorship and the people the main character was close to trade him, he comes back as his Jesus self, and they just forgive him and they're friends again, even though he put them through 6 months of hell on earth, and they even left Shu to bleed out as Guy took his powers, and they did fucking nothing. In fact, I don't know why Shu even cares about these people, because some of these people have pretty much stabbed them in the back before, quite a few times, and yet, after all that shit, they're still good friends. Even though Shu should do the logical thing and go tell them all to fuck themselves and should get better friends. Also, the bad guys in this series suck, and the only bad guy that's remotely decent is Guy when he becomes the main villain. The rest are throwaway fodder I couldn't care less about. They're pretty much there to be hated, and honestly... they're not good villains, they're just fodder villains. They feel like the villains that you fight when you get up to the main boss, who's actually cool. But no, these guys just feel like minions that were given script role. No. These guys pretty much feel like minions that were given speaking roles. That's how bland they are. Very bad villains, horrible villains. The Rape Fairy from Sword Art Online was better written than this shit. Now, since I finished my rant and rave about the characters, time for the animation, or as some people like to call them, the pretty colors. The animation is very, very good. It's on that very god tier level of animation, especially for the time it came out. It has some fantastic CGI animation, which does not clash with the 2D animation. There's also some fantastic action scenes that will make you cry how well done they are. The backgrounds are great, and it captures this epic size of this high-tech city. This is definitely a show I would totally recommend to watch in HD and UAN, because this show just gives you fucking orgasms, man. Like, when I was watching this for the first time, I was like, holy shit, this looks beautiful. Why can't everything else look this great? The character designs are okay, but I think the mecha are generic and kind of boring, except the main character's stepmother. Like, holy shit, 10 out of 10. Why isn't she in hentai? Because with a character design like that, should be perfect, if you know what I'm saying. Wank, wank, nudge, nudge. Now time for the sounds. The opening and ending songs are alright, but nothing really moved me. It has a pretty good OST that fits the tone for every scene that it'll have, and also that insert song boss sounds fucking amazing when they use it, like, "In my drainage," that one. The OST was composed by Hiroki Sanano, who has done the OST for Kill la Kill and Attack on Titan. Sub and dub are both good, but I like the dub better because the main character is voiced by the same person who did the voice for the main character I Am You and This Is a Zombie. Now that I finished about sound, time to move on to enjoyment. So enjoyment. Now, despite this show being pretty much a train wreck of an anime, I find myself very entertained with the few aspects this show did well at. I thought the whole void power was an interesting idea for a power. I also thought the whole thing of him being a totalitarian dictator was slightly interesting, because they could have done a discussion of how power corrupts or how the burdens of a leader, but they never really go that far into it. I also like the OST and the animation, and that's pretty much why Guilty Crown, I liked it for very simple reasons. So overall, if you're looking for an anime, if you are new to anime or looking for something just for entertainment, then Guilty Crown can provide that to you to a T. because the animation is great. It has a lot of OST. The moment you look at the show critically is the moment it falls apart at the seams because story and characters are very poorly handled. If this was taken more seriously and they did some slight story and character edits, this would have been a 10 times better show. But as it is right now, it's a failure. Thank you. This is Bio Gundam. Thank you for listening, and hopefully this does not come out as a butchered train wreck mess like the anime I just reviewed, because I'm still learning. So this is Bio Gundam. Thank you for joining me for my review of Guilty Crown, and sayonara. This is Bio Gundam signing off.